In the rainforest meta, the iguana is one of the most iconic builds from the reptile class. It's a herbivorous lizard, native to Central and South America, most often found high up in the canopy or near riverbanks. With an average length of over 1 meter and some individuals reaching nearly 2 meters, including the tail, iguanas rank among the largest lizard builds in the region. They boast excellent vision, especially tuned to detect colors and motion, giving them constant awareness of nearby threats. On top of that, they're equipped with a so-called third eye, a light-sensitive organ on the top of the head. While it can't form detailed images, it detects shadows from above, providing an early warning system against aerial predators like hawks. Iguanas are strict herbivores, spending most of the day basking in the sun and feeding on leaves, flowers, and fruit. Despite their laid-back lifestyle, they've proven remarkably adaptable, thriving across a wide range of tropical forest environments, from riverside edges to dense canopy zones. As a result, the iguana may not be an aggressive build or a top-tier predator, but it has secured a stable spot in the survivor tier for millions of years, showing that sometimes you don't need high damage or heavy armor to maintain your place in the natural meta. About basic stats, the iguana isn't exactly terrifying, but it does pack one of the trickiest stat lines in the entire jungle meta. Its HP sits at a middling level, but that's offset by decent regen, thanks to a diet of leaves and fruit packed with energy. Attack isn't its strong suit, but the tail whip knockback can stun just enough to create space and disengage from close-range predators. Defense isn't on par with tankier reptiles, but its tough scales, combined with periodic skin shedding, help reduce debuffs from parasites. Speed is the iguana's shining. It can burst into quick sprints when necessary, scale trees with near parkour-like agility, and swim fluidly enough to outplay predators that thought they had it cornered. Its stealth is also respectable. Camouflage coloration often lets it avoid combat before it even starts. And then there's its special ability, Panic Jump. When chased, the iguana can dive straight from a tree into water, reset aggro, and activate a swim boost to make a clean getaway. With this, the iguana maintains a balanced stat line optimized for a survivor tier playstyle, proving that you don't always need raw damage or heavy armor. Sometimes, mobility and adaptability are the most valuable stats for staying viable in the natural meta. When your strongest skill is pure offense, you already know what kind of build you're running. And it's definitely not the iguana. This build is a masterclass in turning defensive tools into highlight escapes. Instead of being all in on damage or defense, iguana invests the majority of its skill points into mobility and utility. Its main move, Tail Whip Knockback. At first glance, it looks like a useless flick, but in practice, it's just enough to throw a predator off rhythm and create the perfect escape window. Next is Climb Mastery, letting iguana scale trees with ninja-like fluidity, turning the canopy into its personal safe zone. When the land map gets too dangerous, iguana switches scripts with swim proficiency, diving, and maneuvering with enough agility to outplay an entire predator squad. The passive camouflage skin works as free stealth, stands still for just a few seconds, and most predators assume it's nothing more than a stick or log. And the highlight, special ability, Panic Jump. A daring leap from high ground straight into the water, instantly resetting aggro, then activating a swim boost to vanish in seconds. Predators are left spamming, while the iguana is already away from keyboard farming somewhere else. In the end, iguana's moveset proves one thing. Sometimes avoiding combat isn't just a strategy, it's an art form. While many reptile builds rely on venom or heavy armor to stay viable, the iguana takes a completely different approach. The iguana's strengths don't come from brute force, but from a clever mix of adaptability and mobility. Thanks to its ability to thrive in a wide range of tropical environments, from dense canopy to riverbanks, the iguana always maintains a solid spot in the meta. Mobility is its biggest advantage. They can climb like ninjas, swim with surprising agility, and sprint fast enough to escape most mid-tier predators. All of this movement is backed up by exceptional vision, plus a third eye that detects shadows from above, making the iguana an expert at avoiding combat before it even starts. On top of that, their herbivore diet provides reliable energy regen. Farming leaves and fruit is low risk and highly sustainable, meaning they don't need to gamble in dangerous encounters. Combine that with a relatively long lifespan, and the iguana emerges as a build focused on living long and living smart, proving that in the nature meta, sometimes intelligent disengagement is stronger than raw damage or armor. For all its mobility and adaptability, the iguana kit still comes with some glaring flaws. First off, low damage output, no venom, no lethal bite, and the tail whip barely does more than create space. This means the iguana has almost zero chances of winning a direct 1v1 against high-tier predators. Defense is also pretty underwhelming. The scales are tougher than many lizards, but nowhere near strong enough to block a raptor's talons or a snake's bite. Another major issue is environmental dependence. The iguana's whole playstyle relies on trees and nearby water as escape routes. Drop it into open terrain, and suddenly its mobility stat line loses a lot of value, leaving it extremely vulnerable. And perhaps the biggest weakness is in the early game. Hatchling iguanas are tiny, fragile, and a favorite snack for birds of prey, snakes, and even other lizards. Survival rates for young iguanas are notoriously low, with only a lucky few making it to mid-game. In short, while the iguana can thrive as a survivor tier build, it's a strategy that only works if it avoids fair fights and keeps plenty of escape routes open. Cut off its mobility, and the iguana kit falls apart fast. Overall, the iguana holds a pretty secure spot in the survivor tier of the rainforest meta. It doesn't have the raw stats to compete with top predators, and its lack of offensive options keeps it from climbing any higher. But what it lacks in firepower, it makes up for in consistency. By investing heavily in mobility, awareness, and adaptability, iguanas have built one of the most sustainable playstyles around. They can outlast many reptile builds that rely on brute force or venom, simply because the iguana doesn't need risky all-in plays to stay viable. As long as there are trees to climb and rivers to dive into, iguanas remain some of the most reliable escape artists in the game. So while they'll never be raid bosses or apex predators, iguanas prove one important truth. Sometimes playing safe, farming consistently, and disengaging smartly is the best way to stay relevant in the natural meta. With their balanced stat line and steady playstyle, iguanas deserve a placement in mid-B tier, a safe but far from forgettable rank among reptile builds. Iguanas may be masters at dodging combat, but that doesn't mean they're free from predators. In fact, there's an entire roster of builds seemingly designed to hard counter them. First up are the raptor birds, eagles, hawks, and even oversized vultures. These players run a terrifying combo: long-range vision, aerial dominance, and high-speed dive bombs. No matter how fast an iguana scrambles up a tree, just a split second of hesitation is enough for these aerial predators to lock on and unleash a grab attack that's nearly impossible to dodge. Even when iguanas activate their panic jump into the water, many birdmains are patient enough to wait it out and strike the moment they resurface. Next are the snake builds, especially boas and pythons. These aren't burst damage assassins, they're grapple lock specialists. With god-tier stealth, they can approach completely undetected, and once the constrict skill lands, the iguana's mobility advantage becomes worthless. To make matters worse, snakes often share the same biome as iguanas, making them one of the most common natural counterpicks. And of course, the human build is the ultimate hard counter. With tools, traps, and even the ability to tame, humans downgrade iguanas from survivor-tier rainforest specialists into cheap protein or exotic pets. Once a human player targets them, escape options are basically non-existent. In short, iguanas can dance around most mid-tier predators, but once they run into aerial hunters or grapple specialists, their entire mobility-based kit gets shut down. The current iguana meta is fairly balanced, but that doesn't mean this build is completely safe. In the past, iguanas were one of the most stable survivor-tier picks in the rainforest meta. No need for high damage or heavy armor. Just mobility and adaptability were enough to outplay most mid-tier predators. But now, the meta is shifting. Rainforests are being cleared for farmland and human expansion, shrinking the safe biomes iguanas rely on. At the same time, raptor birds and snake builds are getting population buffs across many regions, massively increasing the threat of being countered. In this situation, iguanas need some buffs to avoid falling down the tier list in the near future. One potential patch would be unlocking an omnivorous perk, expanding their diet to include insects or small prey to reduce resource competition as forests shrink. A speed buff during the juvenile stage would also go a long way toward avoiding the early game too squishy problem, which is currently a critical weakness. On top of that, buffs to social bond or even some form of herd tactics could help iguanas better counter aerial predators, rather than always playing solo and getting picked off. Only then could iguanas maintain their steady mid-B tier placement and avoid the fate of becoming just another living fossil, a once successful survivor build that fell out of the meta for failing to adapt. The iguana doesn't pack massive damage, nor can it intimidate predators like the tankier reptile classes. But in the rainforest meta, it's still a top-tier escape artist, slippery enough to outplay most mid-tier threats. If the iguana is just a mid-B tier survivor in the natural meta, which build do you think truly deserves the title of Master of Survival?